Ukraine says it's downed more than a dozen Russian missiles in the early hours of Monday. Ukraine's military said its air defense systems destroyed 15 out of 18 air-launched cruise missiles targeting Kyiv. An air raid alert in the capital lasted almost 3 hours. City officials say there have been no casualties or destroyed infrastructure in Kyiv. Russia has intensified its strikes on Ukraine in recent days in anticipation of Kyiv's spring counteroffensive. Let's cross over to our correspondent in Kyiv, Nick Conley. Nick, tell us more about these overnight airstrikes.
Well, we have had reports from the east of the country, from near Dnipro, of 25 casualties. They haven't said if these are fatalities or people who have been wounded. So evidently, not all of the country is as well defended as Kyiv. As you mentioned there, Kyiv, without any major impact from these attempted strikes, they were all shot down over Kyiv. This is a city that is privileged, obviously, in terms of the air defenses that it has. But everyone's scratching their heads here, trying to understand why these Russian attacks have started once again. We had basically a month and a half without major cruise missile attacks away from the front lines. And lots of the analysts are saying probably it's just because the Russians can. They were really running out of missiles after those attacks on the energy system here over the autumn and the winter. When they picked up those missiles that had been shot down, it seemed that they had been produced very recently and taken to the front lines basically immediately. And now, after a month and a half, 2 months, Russia basically has a big stock of missiles, big enough to send enough missiles into Ukraine in one go to have a hope of trying to get past those defences. But for now, they're holding up. But certainly people here in Ukraine, once again, very painfully aware of the fact that they shouldn't ignore those warnings.
Nick, stay with us while we take a look at this report on the situation in Bakhmut in eastern Ukraine. The Russian Defense Ministry claims its troops have captured more territory there, but Kyiv says it's still in control of a vital supply line.
Ukrainian soldiers doing maintenance on their tank on the outskirts of Bakhmut. The city is often referred to as the meat grinder on account of the heavy losses both sides have suffered there. Ukraine's troops say that bit by bit they're being squeezed out.
As far as I can see, there's almost nothing left in Bakhmut that is controlled by us.
Moscow's defense ministry now says it's come a little closer to its goal of taking all of the city.
In the direction of Donetsk, assault teams continued to displace the enemy in the western part of Bakhmut and captured 4 quarters.
Russia's military, along with the Wagner mercenary group, have been trying to capture the city for months. But despite Russia's claimed advance, Kyiv appears to still have a foothold and, most critically, a supply line into the city. And right now, both sides are running low on supplies of ammunition.
Now the Russians are shooting less. They're much more restrained compared to when we got here. Back then, they were shooting all night, but now they only shoot in response to our artillery.
Meanwhile, Kyiv has taken delivery of a host of new Western weaponry and is getting set to launch its coming counteroffensive. Speaking to a newly formed battle squad, President Volodymyr Zelensky said Ukrainian blood spilled in Bakhmut would not be in vain.
The main battles are coming soon. We must free our land and our people from Russian slavery. We must restore our full state border, both on land and at sea.
It's unclear when the counteroffensive will start, but Kyiv hopes the new Western firepower will make all the difference.
Nick, the battle for Bakhmut has been going on for months at great cost to both sides. Remind us why Moscow and Kyiv are investing so much in that particular battle.
Well, I think for Moscow, the motivation seems to be largely a symbolic one. They're basically very short on big victories in recent months. Basically, since Ukraine took back all that territory in the east and the south in the autumn, they haven't had much to celebrate, so they were desperate to have something to show for all these lives lost. On the Ukrainian side, I think the motivation was a different one. It was about basically trying to bind Russia's efforts in one place to try and get Russia to invest as many lives and as much tech as possible for the smallest possible gains. And I still think that in terms of Ukraine leaving Bakhmut, it's more a question of when rather than if. Experts say that only about 15% of the city limits are still within Ukrainian control. There is a route in and out. The Russians keep on trying to encircle the Ukrainian forces there and to basically take that route under their control. That isn't working out for them right now. The Ukrainians keep pushing them back, but it is a very, very grim situation with huge losses on both sides, as you mentioned there. And there is a sense that this is not going to go on forever, but it's obviously a very brave pundit who gives some kind of prediction as to when the Ukrainians will eventually leave Bakhmut.
Nick, thank you very much. Our correspondent Nick Connolly in Kyiv.